everybody, this is Captain Fred, your host for Aviation Theater, and a proud member of the San Diego Aerospace Museum, the first place to visit when you come to San Diego. We have a good program for you today, and we'll get started right after this important message. This is a C-121A Constellation coming into Gillespie Airport. It will be followed by a B-24 Liberator and a B-17 Flying Fortress. Although commercial passenger flights were available much earlier, the Constellation, designed in the 1940s, was the first pressurized aircraft in widespread use. It was the Concorde of its day, allowing transcontinental flight for 80 passengers in a relatively brief 8-hour period, coast to coast in 8 hours. A total of 856 Constellations in 4 model variations were built between 1943 and 1958. They were first created to suit the needs of the wealthy aviation legend Howard Hughes, who wanted them for his trans-world airline. The Connie coming here today was built right here in California, in Burbank, and it was delivered to the United States Air Force in 1948. The Constellation preceded the well-known workhorse DC-3 by about 18 months and was eventually replaced by the C-130 Hercules. Although Connies did fly in both the Korean War and in Vietnam. This is Tim Coons, and he's the maintenance chief. Is that the correct name?
You could use that term, crew chief.
Crew chief, yeah, maintenance chief,
yeah.
For the Connie, the Constellation. Can you tell us what you're doing here today?
Showing the airplane off to the general public. They seem to be really enjoying it. So
that's a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, quite a bit.
I'm going to ask you some questions that the general public would ask you if they were here today. First of all, the Constellation was manufactured starting in, what, 1948?
This one was 48, but they actually started the production, well, design went on in 1939, prior to World War II, and then through World War II it was kind of stagnated, but then right after World War II they started real production again.
The big production started after World War II. From 1948 until when?
Right up to about, I'd say mid-50s, they quit discontinuing. 1649 was the last model built, and that was the great big one. It was about 56, 57, I think, was the last one made.
So they built 1,649 of them?
No, only about 846 is what they claim. So
how did it get that number?
What, 846?
You said 1649 was the last one?
Sorry, 1649 was a model number.
Oh.
This is a 749, there was a 1049, and then a 1649. And prior to that, there was 049s and 649. So there's about 5 complete models with the experimental testing right on up through the actual production runs.
So from 1948 until the mid-50s, they built about 800?
Correct, about 840 some odd.
Let me ask you some specifics. It has 4 engines. What size engines and what do they drink?
Quite a bit of fuel, and they're Curtiss-Wright 3350s. That's and they drink cruise power will burn about 100 gallons per hour per engine. Takeoff power is about 3 times that per engine, so it drinks quite a bit of fuel.
100 gallons per hour per engine. That's 400 gallons an hour.
Correct. A lot of fuel. A lot of fuel.
But it flies at what kind of speed?
We're pulled back right now about 45-50%, and we'll do an honest indicated 200, 210 knots. And we true out all the time. At least it got a good 225 somewhere in that area.
And it has a range of probably 4,000.
Oh yeah, about 4,300. We can go 1.5 times across the country
without refueling.
Without refueling, if we wanted to.
Now, the wingspan, I believe, is just about the distance of what the Wright brothers did on their first flight. What is it, 100 and what?
Wingspan's 123 feet on this one. And I can't remember, my history fails me as far as the Wright brothers flew, but it was not a whole lot farther than that, I guess.
I remember reading somewhere that the Wright brothers could have made their first flight on the wing of this airplane. Tell us about that three-tail.
Well, that, as the story goes, it's before my time actually, but the design for the tail came from the hangars in the day. They didn't have anything tall enough for what we have nowadays, so one of the stories is that the hangars at the time, they needed a three-tail or something small. Keep the profile small, so in order to keep the same surface area, you had to put 3 rudders on the thing, but it was primarily because of room in its day.
Instead of putting 2 tall ones, they put 3 mediums or 3 short ones.
Right. So that kept the height down on the airplane. And I mean, you look at a 747 nowadays, and they're like 65 feet off the ground, so quite a bit of difference.
Yes. What else would you like to tell our viewers about this airplane today? The public obviously loves it. You have a long line here.
Yeah, it's we're really happy and proud that everybody showed up. It's really a bit of history. There's only 2 of these left in the world flying, and it's really nice to see everybody turn out for it.
In addition to civilian passenger planes, this was also used by the military for material air transport.
Yes, the actual designation is MATS for Military Air Transport Service. This one here is the C-121A, which is actually an all-military airplane. The rest of them, mostly the 1049s, are what everybody's really used to looking at. That's the big airliner that everybody used to see. Although there were quite a few 749 airliners as well.
They used this airplane to haul passengers in civilian life. In military life, what would you haul in a MATS plane?
Anything the military wants. People.
And anything that could get in the door?
Pretty much anything get in.
Would these planes have been in the Berlin airlift in '49?
Absolutely. This one, as a matter of fact, was in the Berlin airlift. We looked in the archives, and this actual serial number was in the Berlin airlift.
They even hauled coal. They couldn't get coal in to heat the homes, and they actually hauled coal in these airplanes.
Yeah, so the history, the food, primarily coal. Anything you could think of to keep people alive was hauled in back then, and it was a hell of a mission, really. It was to see it still sitting here on the ramp is great.
And a terrific airplane, too. Thank you for visiting with us today. The Constellation, the Connie, here at the Skyview Cafe at Gillespie Airport in El Cajon. And as the Constellation leaves, the B-24 Liberator and the B-17 Flying Fortress arrives at Gillespie Airport. This is Scott Johnson, and he's the pilot of this beautiful B-24, which is known as the Liberator. Could you tell us a little bit about the history of this particular airplane?
Certainly. This airplane was originally a Lend-Lease airplane with the RAF in the Pacific. It served in the Pacific and was abandoned in India. And then after India shortly thereafter became a country on its own, decided we needed an air force. Well, here are all these B-24 Liberators sitting around that they decided to make airworthy airplanes. So they took their B-24s and flew them for about 20 years. And the interesting thing with the Indian Air Force is that the same crew stays with the same airplane for their entire career in the Air Force. You don't upgrade or change an airplane, you stay with the same one. So if you notice, our co-pilot seat is mounted in the floor about 2 inches back farther than the pilot's seat. So we figured we had a co-pilot with long legs in there. After that portion of its stint, it was purchased by a collector out of England. Then it came over to the United States, where it was purchased by the Collings Foundation.
When would it have been purchased by the collector from England?
It would have been around 85, I believe. And from that point on, the Collings Foundation started what has become to be known as one of the largest and most complex aircraft restorations in history.
Yes, I have a picture of this airplane on my hangar wall because it won the Grand Championship a couple of years ago. When was that?
Let's see, it would have been, I believe, 90 it won Grand Champion, and then subsequently the year after it won returning Grand Champion. And just the past Oshkosh, we won Judge's Choice with it. With the fact that, you're going up against, T-28s and P-51s and things like that, and T-6s. This is a 4-engine World War II bomber that's had 1,100 hours on it since the restoration. It went 3 years straight without missing a city on its national tour.
It would be a lot easier to restore a Model A Ford than it would be a Greyhound bus.
That's it. That's a good analogy with it, too. You have 4 of everything now. And being the only one that flies, you can't quite go down to the B-24 store and pick up parts. But
now, before this airplane became a part of the Indian Air Force, tell us a little bit about its World War II history.
Well, the World War II history, as I know it, is it served as a sub-chaser with the RAF in the Pacific. And, of course, it would have the Bombay tanks in it and the depth charges. They'd go out hunting for subs and U-boats, and they'd find one, they'd try and think it with the depth charges, basically, and that's it. Its career was not very long. It came out of Fort Worth in 1944. So it came out towards the tail end of the war, which is, with most of the warbirds that are around now, they came out towards the end of the war, which is why they're still here.
The others were shot down.
Or something else worse than that, probably.
How about a few specifics about the engines, the firepower, the crew, and so forth?
You had 10 50 caliber machine guns on it. The engines are Pratt & Whitney 1830-65, and as far as I know, somebody's probably going to call you up and tell you how wrong I am, but I believe this is one of the only aircraft that used this -65 1830.
Now you say it had 10 50 caliber machine guns. Was the crew 10?
The crew was also 10, but that doesn't necessarily go like that. You had pilot and co-pilot, and then a navigator served as a gunner, ball turret gunner, 2 waist gunners, tail gunner, all sorts of stuff like that. Top turret gunner was also your flight engineer.
So it was similar to the B-17 in firepower and bombs?
Correct. It was too shy of the B-17 on 50 calibers, where it had 12, but it could carry about 33% more of a bomb load with 30% less wing area, which is one of the other major things that the B-24 is known for, is the Davis wing, this is the only airplane I know of that has the Davis wing on it.
It also has a Fred White tail on it. I fly an air coupe. Yes. I fly a red, yellow, and mirror polished chrome air coupe. And Fred White told me that he put 2 tails on the airplane to put it outside the prop blast. In a single-engine airplane, the twin rudders are outside the prop blast, and I noticed in this airplane that you have the twin tails.
Correct, and that actually, if you bring the inboard engines up to about 1,000 RPM, it actually assists you in the taxiing because it is in the prop blast. Now your rudders are effective and you can kind of steer it a little better, and this is a challenging airplane to taxi with the full castering nose wheel. It teaches you about differential power right from the start.
Tell us a little bit now about the program that you're in. You were at El Toro before you came here to Gillespie, and you're leaving here and going to Carlsbad, and what about your tour?
Well, we are on our national tour, which we do every year with the two airplanes, the B-17 909 and the B-24 All-American. Last year we went to 137 cities and 31 states, and we like to think of it as one of the most ambitious touring schedules in warbirds, and the fact that, you know, here we are. Up until March, we had not missed a city for maintenance in 3 years, which is as good, if not probably better, than the Blue Angels.
Absolutely. We flew the Fuji blimp a while back, and they have 2 crews because they can't keep one crew on the road that long.
Yeah, we spend a lot. We see a lot of hotels and a lot of airports, but we get to do a lot of neat things today. Like today, we had the Traveler and the Stearman and different airplanes out here, and you get to meet a lot of people. And the nice part about it is you get to bring the airplanes to a lot of people, and they get to actually walk through them as per if they were in a museum. You know, you'd be standing about this far away from them saying, wow, it's really neat that I'm this close to a B-24. But now Granddad can take his grandson through the airplane and say, yes, this is where I was a waist gunner. This is where I sat when I was a flight engineer, things like that. And that makes it a little more special.
And we were at 35,000 feet, and it was 40 below zero.
Exactly. And here's where I plugged in my flying suit. And then the best part about it is you get to see them fly. It's an airplane. If it, you know, you restore an airplane, it ought to be in the air. That's my opinion anyway. It's like a car. Restore a car and not drive it wouldn't really be the best.
I think they're impressed by the size of it. Most people don't realize how big they were.
That's exactly it. You know, this one has an empty weight of 37,000 pounds, I believe, right off the top of my head, and it's just not something you see every day anymore. That is what really makes it special. And to see it with a B-17 in front of it or behind it, man, that's as good as it gets.
I agree. A B-24 Liberator. This is Denise Van Grunsven, who is the co-pilot of this beautifully restored B-17 Flying Fortress. Denise, what is the cruising speed of this B-17?
Well, we normally cruise it between 160 to 180 miles per hour.
160 to 180, and it has 4 engines?
Yes.
And they drink what kind of gasoline?
100 octane low lead.
And how much would they use an hour?
Depends on our cruising speed, but approximately 50 gallons per hour per engine.
50 gallons per hour per engine. If I add correctly, that's 200 gallons an hour. How long have you been in this program?
I've been a volunteer on these aircraft for just a little over a year.
And the history of this particular airplane, does it date back to World War II?
Yes, it did, but it's a late model. It was built in April of 1945. It never saw combat. However, it served in the military for a number of years as air-sea rescue.
Now, in addition to flying this B-17, you do other flying, don't you?
Yeah, for a living, I fly for an airline, Northwest Airlines, based out in Minneapolis.
Northwest Airline, and you are a co-pilot or what?
I'm a first officer on a Boeing 727.
First officer. That means you're the pilot in command.
He's a captain.
Oh, the captain
Yes,
is the pilot
captain,
in command.
first officer, second officer.
And what is the name of the airline again?
Northwest.
Northwest. And does Northwest fly here to San Diego?
Yes, it does.
What do you see as the opportunities for women at the present time in aviation? Are they different from in the past?
Oh yeah, almost any position in the aviation business is available for women. The opportunities are, you know,
If you have the ability, you get an equal shot.
you have an equal shot. Right now, though, the aviation industry is not doing well. There's not that many job openings, and especially in the airlines, they're not hiring pilots.
For anybody, regardless men or women.
Right. But I see it's a cyclical industry, and it should be starting back up again in the next year or two.
Very good. Thank you. The co-pilot of this beautiful B-17 Flying Fortress. This Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress flew 100 missions without an abort or loss of crewmen. It was assigned to combat duty on February 25, 1944. It made 18 trips to Berlin, dropped 562,000 pounds of bombs, and had 21 engine changes. The B-24 Liberator was designed by Consolidated Aircraft, which is now General Dynamics. It had a speed of 300 miles per hour, a range of 3,000 miles, and flew at an altitude of 30,000 feet. What an airplane! Let's watch this takeoff. Think of Gregory Peck as General Frank Savage in 12 O'Clock High as we watch this B-17 Flying Fortress take off.